Hello and welcome to Walking the Earth podcast, where we explore the travel lifestyle. You can find us online at WTEpodcast.com, or you can subscribe on iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. I'm Mike Margulies. Today I am in Baltimore, Maryland, and my guest today is Jared Brock. Jared's calling in from Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Jared, how are you doing, man?
Hi, Mike. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm great, and it's really cool to have you on. You have a really fascinating story, just from what I've heard so far and what I've read from. It's so you went on a 37,000-mile pilgrimage around the world, doing everything from dancing with rabbis to going to North Korea, visiting monks, even chatting with the Pope. You have a book about the experience called Living Prayerfully. And it sounds really fascinating and interesting, and definitely a different angle than anyone I've had on the show thus far. So, yeah, I guess I'd really be interested in what inspired the trip for you, man.
This trip, it's not the first time I've done like some serious epic travel, but this trip particularly
Yeah.
it was actually started in the red light district of Amsterdam. My wife and I run a charity to fight human trafficking, and we
Hmm.
were undercover making a documentary about the issue. And we went during the middle of this like huge soccer game, and there was just like hundreds of drunk dudes just crawling the streets, and
Right.
the women in the windows, many of them have been trafficked, and we were there with an outreach worker friend of my wife's, and so you see the pain and the hurt and the abuse and the pimping and the trafficking that's all going on in that, and you see these guys puking in the streets and the police on horseback, and the scene was kind of just so overwhelming. And in the middle of the district is the oldest building in Amsterdam, and it's an 800-year-old church, and it's still
Hmm.
active. And every hour on the hour, the church bells ring, and
Right.
men are abusing women to the soundtrack of church bells. And I just stood in the middle of that, and I was so overwhelmed. And
Yeah.
I just had this realization that I needed like spiritual power and prayer to end this crazy injustice. And that started me on this pilgrimage to kind of explore prayer around the world, all sorts of Judeo-Christian prayer traditions, not just the little part of the spiritual world that I kind of come from. So, yeah, it was a
Hmm.
wild trip. 12 countries, 3 continents, 37,000 miles.
That's wild, man. Actually, I'm curious to ask you actually about the Amsterdam bit, because it's interesting because I've always thought of it as in Amsterdam, there's this idea, right, where they've legalized the prostitution and therefore it's, they say it's safer and
Mm.
all this stuff, and I guess something that you bring up that I didn't really have a concept of is I always thought of it as these are people that of their own free will are, and I guess from a philosophical perspective, I would
Mhm.
think, okay, if someone chooses to do this, that's okay. But I didn't have the perspective that a lot of the women there are actually trafficked in.
Yeah, like
That's
I mean, and this was something, of course, that as we researched and interviewed police officers and care workers and the world's experts, that we came to realize as well. But like for example, in the red light districts of Amsterdam, they interviewed the Hungarian women specifically, and over half of them came from one tiny impoverished town in northeastern Hungary. Like they were basically on like a straight trafficking route to the red light district. Choice is a fascinating concept regarding
hmm,
prostitution. So, for example, in the States, so like it's very easy to say, if you're over 18, you should have the right to sell your body. I think a lot of people would agree with that. But
right. I tend to be like a libertarian
yeah,
kind of
sure.
attitude myself.
Yeah,
So
of course.
yeah,
So that seems like a reasonable thing. But what if that person was trafficked at the age of 14 and now she's 18 and she says it's her choice?
hmm,
That really kind of throws into perspective
right.
that question. And what's crazy is that in the United States, the average age of entry into prostitution is 14 years old, which is by definition trafficking. So,
Right.
if you're starting from a position of trafficking and now you're 18, that really throws the whole choice thing into limbo. The other part of it, of course, is um,
Choice is an illusion by those who have power. Is that kind of
yeah, potentially. And the other part is the idea of, okay, let's say we determine that yes, someone should have the right to sell their body. Do we believe that others should have the right to purchase their body? So what we determined as a nation was that while it is legal for someone to sell themselves into slavery picking cotton out of desperation, no one should be able to enslave them on a plantation. We just determined
Mm-hmm.
that as a nation. And what we found is that in countries that legalize prostitution, they have way more prostitution because it's legal, so people do it, but also they have way more trafficking because traffickers and pimps see this as a very lucrative business to bring girls into this trade. So you end up with,
Mm.
like in Germany, 1.1 million men pay for sex every day, and now pimps and traffickers have brought in over 400,000 women into prostitution there. So we heard some like awful stories of like, teenage girls self-performing abortions with coat hangers because they had to get back to
Oh.
the streets for their pimp. Like but that's a whole other topic. We're here to talk about travel. But yeah, it was a crazy eye-opening experience, and it kind of spurred me on this pilgrimage around the world.
Yeah, yeah, that is very interesting. It certainly is opening my perspectives coming from a libertarian kind of philosophical
Mhm.
mindset. Now, hearing you say this gives a new perspective, and I guess so. And then I guess I'm interested. Also, this led you to the religious spiritual pilgrimage. So that's interesting. So you were saying that you, I guess, how do you see it, like the prayer and religious angle, as the kind of an answer to these kind of things, or how did
Well,
that become a thing? I guess.
yeah, like I mean, I think there's a very broad concept that most people would agree with that you become like the people you hang out with. So, they
Uh
say
huh.
that you are the average of your five closest
Yep,
relationships.
I was reading something about that just today. That's so
Yeah,
weird.
it's like a
Um,
big concept. And so if you have breakfast every day with Bill Gates, you're going to get better at managing your money. If you have lunch every day with Steven Spielberg, you're going to watch more movies. If you spend time meditating and praying, let's say to Jesus, you are going to become more Christ-like. You're going to become more like the historical person that we know he was, willing to die for his enemies, willing to talk with prostitutes, willing to spend time serving the poor, fighting for justice. You become more like that person, and that's
mm,
going to change you, and that's going to change the world. So that's kind of a uh, secret kind of thing about prayer and spirituality that most people kind of just overlook is that we actually become like whoever we spend time with, and that includes spiritual figures.
that's a very interesting concept, and I could see that working on several angles too.
Mhm,
Like,
totally.
so someone who say prays as a Christian to Jesus could be similar also to maybe someone who's meditating and they are in their mind they're coming closer to say their higher self or
Hmm.
their God inside themselves maybe. And so you're spending time with that person, but whether it's a conception of something like Jesus or something of yourself, or you're spending time with that idea of like an idealized human maybe, and
Hmm.
then you become more of that. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Like I mean, I do come from a Christian tradition,
Yeah.
so I
So
like I
for
mean,
you, it ends up being a lot specifically for like a Christian
yeah,
Jesus. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
definitely. Like I mean, well, and I know how like broken and messed up I am. Like my highest self is still like far short of what I think is out there. Like I just know how
Mm,
messed up I am, like but what I think is important is that everything is faith. Like you have to be a very, very large fool to say anything is 100% guaranteed accurate. So for example, to say that there is no God, to me, that really kind of connotes this sense that, okay, you must know everything, therefore you are God. But on the other hand, if you say 100% there is a God, well, then you are also claiming to be all knowing and therefore you must be
yeah.
God. So
Right.
either way, like, fundamentalism, as we know, is the most dangerous thing on earth. And, so people
mm,
say, like, religion is horrible. Well, do you know what? Fundamentalist religion is horrible. I think that hardcore capitalism is so dangerous. I think that hardcore Catholicism or jihadism in Islam is like every form of fundamentalism is dangerous. It is
right.
all faith. And when you have faith, you you come from a position of love and grace and understanding and patience where you just say, do you know what,
Mm.
we cannot know everything, therefore let's learn to get along, let's pursue justice together, let's find the points where we can agree and hopefully move towards a more peaceful world. So yeah, anyways,
Yeah.
that's a rant on faith.
No, I mean, I agree with you on that. I mean, so I'm not a Christian myself, but
Hmm.
I relate to a lot of the things that you're saying
Hmm.
in that, so, and, I have my own weird views of religion. But, but it's sort of like, there's this idea, anybody who decides that I know what's best. I went and I know my religion is the right one and for sure.
Hmm.
And then, I think what you were saying is right, where if you're doing it right, you end up with a sense of compassion and understanding, and you're wanting
Hmm.
to help everybody. But it gets dangerous in the point where it's like, oh, but I know what the answer is right, and everyone should think the way I think,
Hmm. It's
and
all
that's where it
faith.
kind of
Yeah,
right, right, and that's where it kind of becomes like the fundamentalist version, right, where
you
it's
got it.
like, yeah, this is the answer, this is the truth, and I know it, and I think there's something to say for, at least for my own, I don't know what I consider myself, religious or spiritual, but I'm a seeker,
Hmm.
and as I seek myself spiritually, I'm coming to these kind of thoughts of like, all right, well, if I really want to, it's to follow those ideas of compassion and really like accepting of everyone, and I don't know. I like to think at the end of the day, the different faiths, and maybe you can speak to this because you spent some time
Hmm.
with people of different faiths. I've kind of found that on a deep level, they, in a lot of ways, are saying the same kind of things. So you talk to a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim or a Hindu or a Buddhist, and like there's these core beliefs that kind of, at least from what I've seen, that kind of tether them all together in a weird way. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Because you've spent a lot of time,
Yeah,
you
like I mean,
know.
I just was exploring Judeo-Christian prayer traditions,
Mm,
so I didn't like dig into like Buddhism or Hinduism or anything like that. So I can only speak from, obviously
sure.
experience. Um, but there's a new book coming out later this year by A.J. Jacobs, and it's a book about genealogy, and they've now realized and discovered that every single person on Earth is at the most 55th cousins. We literally are a giant family, and the fact that we beat up and enslave and kill our own family says something about the condition of the human species.
mm,
And I just think
mm.
that I think you can ask almost any person on earth, and they will agree with you that there is more room in this world for grace, humility, love, justice,
Mm.
virtue, character. Like, we can agree on that, like
Yep. Yep.
99% of the world can agree on that. So, yeah, like, I mean, let's let's seek the truth, let's walk
Yeah.
this journey together and figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I can dig that. Now, okay, so I'm gonna. Here's an interesting question. So I, my spiritual journeyings for personally. So I went through a different path, right? But I came to similar conclusions, which I find interesting. Where like, yes, we want this love and compassion. Is there a time though? I think about what about the people who are oppressed? Is there, this is a question for myself because I always tend to think I'm a nonviolent man. Nonviolence is the answer. But then you look at, okay, what about people who fight back, who are oppressed? Is there a forum for that? I'm just kind of, I don't know, curious to get your thoughts on this.
Mm.
As a kind of a man of faith sort of thing. I don't know.
Well, like I mean, let's go to a place that I went in this book. I went to North Korea for New Year's last year, and there are over 50,000 Christians in concentration camps in North Korea. It's been rated,
Really?
yeah, it's been rated the most dangerous place on earth for Christians 12 years in a row. Over 1 million people have starved to death in the last 30 years, and it's like being on Mars, Mike. Like, it's actually a whole other world. But what's interesting is um, it's so much more than political. So the country is pretty much anti-religion, but they're actually very religious. So they believe in something called the Juche idea, and there's actually a giant tower there that's exactly 3 feet taller than the Washington Monument. So they can say it's the biggest granite tower in the world, and it's called the Juche Idea Tower. And basically what they believe is that they are the captains of their fate and the masters of their soul, and they believe in radical self-reliance, that
Oh, that
they
sounds like Burning Man.
it sounds like all of humanity, that
Yeah.
we are somehow God. But what's interesting is we are not in any way God. We are not, there's not a single self-made man on this planet, if only for the fact that we were all breast or bottle fed. Like, from our very moment of conception, we were reliant on others and on some force beyond ourselves. And
Mm.
until North Korea realizes that as a nation, they will always be radically reliant on their dictators because they believe they are self reliant. But what it ends up being, Mike, is that they go once a week to a local food dispensary for their like meager allotment of beans and tofu and rice. And they go to department store number one for their annual allotment of clothes, and there is no department store number two. Like, they are assigned their houses, they are assigned their jobs. It's
Mm.
it's radically reliant, not self-reliant, and it's because they
Right.
believe an idea that's simply incorrect, that we are independent of each other.
Oh, yeah. I would say. I mean, we're clearly, you look at the world, right? We're all very much interdependent,
Hmm.
and that's the nature of what we are. Although, I don't know, here's a thought. Is it possible that we are all God? And we're getting into a real spiritual, philosophical
No
thing
kidding.
here. But I don't know, it just seems to be. I just like, I kind of like these kind of talks, though. It's sort of like, I don't know, there's this, I don't know if this is true or not, but it's a thought I've toyed with is that if God is everywhere, so in a sense, maybe it's not. There's an arrogance to think like I am God. You know,
Hmm.
that's a danger trap. But there's also what if there's in India, for example, they say Namaste, which is sort of like it's sort of to say the God within me acknowledges the God within you.
Hmm.
And there was something I always found to be very powerful about that perspective.
Hmm.
I don't know. It's sort of like the divinity within. We all have that divinity within us, and we can all tap into that sort of inner divinity. I don't know. That framework seems to work for me, at least. I find that an interesting way to look at the world, in that
Hmm.
I can find some power within myself, but also not get arrogant about it. Also see that everyone else has that within them, and it's a true or not. I don't know, but
Hmm.
something I like toying with at
Hmm.
least. I don't know. Any thoughts? Or
Yeah, like I mean, that's a huge, huge conversation. I think the
yeah. Well, we don't have to go into if
yeah.
you don't want
I
to.
think the world is full of beauty and brokenness, and I know that there's good and bad in the world, and there's good and bad in all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And like I mean, I think we do have the fingerprints of God all over, or
Right.
call a higher power if that fits better for you. But I think the hand of God is everywhere, and it's on us. But I also think that we have rejected the higher life. I also think
Mm.
that like en masse culture is far more interested in the newest iPhone than we are in helping
Mm.
our brother or sister in need. I think selfishness is our like absolute pursuit in life.
Right. Well,
But
we're like part God and part animal almost. It's like this weird. It's
it's
like
yeah,
the human condition, maybe.
yeah.
I don't
Like I
know.
mean, the Bible calls that the sin nature, that it wants to devour us, and you fight. You don't fight with the dark with more darkness. You fight it with light.
With
So
light.
yeah.
Right. I can dig that. I like
Mhm.
that. um. Yeah. Really cool. Well. And I guess I also want to talk more about travel itself.
Hmm.
This is a travel podcast
Yeah,
after
let's do
all,
it.
and I guess not a religion podcast per se, but but yeah, I mean, so you went all kinds of. You also, I mean, I don't know, any particular experiences stand out to you that were just striking.
Well, my wife and I actually were granted an audience with Pope Francis and got to have lunch at the Vatican. That was kind of a fun experience.
Sweet. So how did you end up landing that gig? You just tell them your project and
Well, we had tried everything, Mike. Like we had tried phone calls, emails, letters to all the consulates and embassies, and I actually got like a fax number in the 21st century, and like we had tried everything, and nothing, nothing, nothing. We're praying for an open door, and we actually flew to Rome and like toured the city, and then we went to Avila, where sorry, we went to Assisi, where St. Francis was from, and then we visited Monte Cassino, where Benedict was from, and our last night
all
in
right.
Monte Cassino, there was a Skype voicemail on my answering machine. It said, "Hello, this is Monsignor Alfred. Please come to the Domo Sancta Marta at noon tomorrow." So we rushed back. Yeah. So we rushed back to Rome, and everything's closed on Sunday, and we've been traveling for months. So my wife and I actually met the Pope in jeans and yoga pants.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but he's gracious, so it wasn't like a big deal or whatever.
Yeah, what's he like in person?
Well, yeah, so we got a couple of minutes with Pope Francis, and we got to ask him one question about prayer, and then we actually had lunch with his personal aide. So we were in the Vatican for a couple of hours, and yeah, the Pope twice during our conversation, he actually asked me to pray for him, and I thought that was really cool.
Hmm.
Here's the spiritual leader for a billion people, and he understands his great need for a power higher than himself. So I thought that was
Hmm.
super
He's
interesting.
humble. Yeah.
Yeah, well,
That's
actually, he gave us rosaries as gifts, and they're stamped with his papal insignia, and the motto is "lowly but chosen."
hmm.
He's entitled to this big papal mansion, but he lives in a spare room of the guest house and eats his meals in the cafeteria. And he was actually at the table beside us for lunch. Like, it's really cool to see someone who's like trying to be like the God of the New Testament. Like he's trying to be like Jesus and just be humble. And that was something humility and selflessness are like hugely underrated virtues in modern society. And I'm so attracted to people like that. So yeah, we had a great time at the Vatican, and definitely something that you never forget. And like Vatican City is like one of the ultimate cities to like check off your like travel list because it's like its own
Right.
country, right? So
Yeah, Vatican's wild.
yeah,
I almost missed it actually. I went years back and almost completely missed it.
crazy.
Because there was like a holiday the next day we were about to leave and we didn't know about it and like a scramble last minute to get there. But yeah, it's a wild place, man.
Yeah,
Um,
171 acre country or something like that. It's like super
yeah.
small. Yeah.
What's striking is just to me was like that walking through, say, the museum there was every square inch is covered with art. Like the
Yeah,
floor, the walls, the ceiling, every single solitary square inch had art on it, and it was just mind blowing to
yeah,
me.
that's amazing.
Um, uh, yeah, it's a fascinating place. I didn't get to meet the Pope though, so
Yeah, pretty
so I
rare.
think you had a little bit even more of a unique, awesome experience
Indeed.
there. Yeah, that's really cool, man. So so you've gone on this 37,000-mile pilgrimage, which is not your first rodeo either. You've
Yeah,
gone
so
on many other trips. Um, I mean, so where do you go from here? Like, what's something else that going forward that you would like to do that you haven't already done?
well, like I mean, yeah, we've had a couple of major trips. When my wife and I first got married, we were a pretty typical North American couple. Nice car, nice apartment, nice stuff. But we actually took 5 months and we backpacked through Central America, and
Hmm.
we did the 100 Things Challenge, where we actually like purged our possessions, and we went on the trip with a total of 88 combined items. And Mike, honestly, that was
Awesome.
so freeing to like,
Yes.
yeah, to get rid of
Yes.
stuff because it's so easy to get possessed by your possessions and spend your life doing maintenance, right?
Hmm.
And I would much rather have experiences and relationships than possessions that will just turn to dust when I'm dead. So,
Hmm.
so yeah, so
I'm
we
with you on
yeah,
that
so
for
we
sure.
traveled. We got a one-way ticket to Costa Rica, and then we went from the Panama Canal all the way to Florida by land transport over 5 months for under $5,000 total for the two of us. And
Awesome.
it just changed everything. Like today, I'm a vegetarian. We
Hmm.
live in a 1975 Airstream trailer. We're carbon neutral. We travel about half the year, location independent, digital nomad kind of situation.
Yes.
And
Yes.
what we've done is we've really tried to create a margin of time and money in order to work on projects that we feel called to work on. So, making documentaries about human trafficking, writing books about prayer, trying to help people in need. So, simplicity, I think, is the absolute key to sustainable long-term travel.
Yep. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. Like that was actually like for me that was a process I went through
Oh,
where,
totally.
um, I started off with a lot more stuff than I ended my trip with actually. So like
Amazing.
as like when I spent like 15 months backpacking around India and Southeast Asia, and
So
like as it
good.
went on, it was like this is way too much stuff I'm just carrying
Hmm.
around for no reason. So like, and it was so like you said, it was just so liberating, at the
Hmm.
once I got it down just to like this one backpack, and then it was wow, this is great. All I have is this backpack and a guitar, and that's just it. And
Amazing.
like it's just yeah, it frees you up, and much respect to you for what you've done because you not only that you've gone like a step further, which is something I'm still like working on myself, which is to become really like truly location dependent, the digital nomad lifestyle where
Hmm.
you've actually made products and not only that but you're working on things that clearly things that you are passionate about,
Hmm.
so you're working towards causes that you believe in, and you found a way to make that part of just your life and your lifestyle, and I really admire and respect that what you've done, so it's really cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, so I guess sounds like you're just kind of uh, looking to continue this same sort of lifestyle, yeah, like
Oh
going
yeah,
to trips.
so I guess in answer to your question, so we base camp ourselves here in Canada for the nice months. So 6 months a year we live in the Airstream, and our bills are like less than $500 a month kind of thing, including like Wi-Fi, heat, hydro, rent, the whole nine yards.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and then the
Yeah.
other 6 months a year, we try to avoid Canadian winters by base camping ourselves somewhere overseas, kind of in the middle of where we want to do our next project. So right now, we're really toying about the idea of base camping in Germany, over the 6 months come the fall. My wife is starting to work on a book. We also, our charity, which is called Hope for the Soul, we're releasing a series of free online classes about human trafficking.
Hmm.
I'm working on my next novel. And so we can do those things from anywhere. So Germany is a great spot because you can fly anywhere in Western Europe very affordably
Yeah.
and very quickly. So it's actually it ends up being a good stewardship because it would cost, at least $1,500 a month when you include heat, hydro, Wi-Fi, the whole nine yards here in Canada.
Right.
Whereas we can do that in Germany for cheaper and have more
You mean like in the
access.
wintertime it goes up in Canada?
Well,
Is that
no, just like it's expensive to live in any big city, basically.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
I mean versus like you said you're able to get by for like 500 now.
yeah, when we live in the trailer, but we
Uh
can't stay in the trailer in the winter. Obviously, it's
right, right. So
yeah,
so that works for like summertime Canada living but not for wintertime
yeah, exactly.
Canada. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so we actually end up saving money and we're closer in proximity to the experts that we want to reach out to the places we need to visit for the projects we're working on. So it ends up being smarter financially and it also ends up being just like a really like eye-opening experience. I really do believe that a change of place plus a change of pace equals change of perspective. And it's
Mm.
so easy to get caught in a rut of just, well, we've all been here, of just like doing life, you know, American dream, white picket fence, 9 to 5 lifestyle, and it's draining because it's so selfish. So when you step outside of that, you can actually give back and you find that life is just far more rewarding.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I agree, man. Some very similar conclusions I've come to as
Hmm.
well. Yeah, but it sounds like you're doing all that. So you just mentioned it. Yeah, Hope for the Sold is so hopeforthesold.com is like your blog about the sex trafficking.
Hmm.
Okay, so you've got course offerings in there as well, and that.
Yeah,
Uh,
those are going to be launching later this summer.
okay,
So my book is called A Year of Living Prayerfully, and you can actually see the book trailer and download the first 2 chapters for free at livingprayerfully.com. And
cool.
we have actually set up a second nonprofit that owns my book. So all of my author royalties are going to go to charity for this book, and
Oh, that's awesome,
it's
man.
printed on sustainably forested trees. Like we want to be good environmental stewards as well. So yeah, we're really hoping that people like really pick up this book and love it. Like it's very like not religious. It's a humorous book on prayer. It's never been done before. So the early reviews have been great, and people are really having a good laugh when they read it. You know, like we go to like
I enjoyed the video.
yeah, we went to like a nudist church. Like we did also. I walked across a bed of hot coals. Like danced with rabbis. Like all sorts of interesting things. So yeah, livingprayerfully.com is where you can find all that stuff.
Great. Yeah, and I will also, of course, post up the links on our. I have for the show notes with this episode on the blog right up at WTEpodcast.com. I'll link up to all the ways folks can find you. So that's livingprayerfully.com and also hopeforthesold.com. Any others I should add? Social
Let's
medias or anything you're on or any other sites, projects?
Twitter at Jared Brock, Facebook at Jared A. Brock. The documentary is called Red Light, Green Light.
Cool. And I'll link up to all those things where folks can find you. But yeah, this was a really cool conversation. Definitely a unique angle on taking the travel that versus other folks I've talked to so far on the show. So I really appreciate getting the chance to get this perspective.
Yeah,
I
my
think it's really
pleasure, Michael.
interesting.
That's great.
Yeah, yeah, and it sounds like you're doing good things. You're helping out to make positive change in the world, and at the same time you are. Sounds like you have a personally for yourself a very fulfilling life,
Hmm.
following this path and doing things that you're passionate about, helping others, and yeah. So much respect to you, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mike.
Yeah, thank you for coming on the show. And thank you, everybody out there, for listening to this episode of Walking the Earth podcast. You can find us on iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. We're also on Facebook. We're on Twitter at WTE Podcast. Or you can find us, all these links and all the ways to find Jared as well, at WTEpodcast.com. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will catch you next time.